"You're safe, kid." The bullet tore through the bright afternoon like a scream nobody heard until it was too late. And in that single frozen second, a stranger's body moved on instinct. Not fear, not logic. Just love carried too far and too fast. One man fell to the pavement under a clean blue sky, shielding a child who was never his. And two families who had never crossed paths before that day were altered in ways no boardroom decision, no amount of money, and no apology could ever undo. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things when it matters most, please take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Home with Dad. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are quietly breaking. The day began like any other weekday afternoon in downtown Crest Falls City, sunlight bouncing off glass towers and warming the concrete sidewalks where people rushed between meetings, errands, and lunch plans. Micah Rowan was walking slower than most, his pace set not by urgency, but by responsibility. His 8-year-old son, Arlo, walked beside him, gripping a paper bag with a bakery logo folded neatly at the top. Inside were 2-day-old pastries the shop owner always slipped him for free when no one was looking. Micah noticed those small mercies. He noticed everything now. Ever since life had narrowed into a careful balancing act of rent receipts, school schedules, and making sure Arlo never felt the weight Micah carried in his chest every day. Micah had not planned to be a single father. He had not planned to bury the woman he loved 3 years earlier after a sudden illness ripped through their lives like a storm without warning. He had not planned to move into a smaller apartment, sell his truck, or take a security job that paid just enough to keep the lights on. But he planned everything else now, meticulously, quietly, with a determination that bordered on stubborn hope. He planned lunches, homework time, bedtime routines, and how to make grief feel like something survivable instead of something that swallowed you whole. That afternoon, Micah had taken the day off. Arlo's school had closed early for maintenance, and Micah promised him a walk through the city and lunch in the park. It was a rare treat, one that made Arlo chatter excitedly about pigeons and fountains and how tall the buildings were. Micah smiled, listening, absorbing the sound of his son's voice like fuel. He did not notice the black sedan parked too close to the curb, engine idling. He did not notice the man stepping out, his movements sharp and wrong. He only noticed the girl. She was about Arlo's age, maybe a year younger, standing a few steps ahead with her nanny. She wore a yellow dress that caught the sunlight and white sneakers that looked too clean for city streets. Her hair was tied back neatly, and she held an ice cream cone already melting down her fingers. She laughed, a sound bright enough to make strangers glance over. Micah glanced too, because parents always did, unconsciously checking on other children the way sailors watch the horizon. Then everything shattered. The sound was not like the movies. It was louder, uglier, a crack that echoed off buildings and snapped the air apart. People screamed. Birds scattered. Micah felt the world tilt as he saw the man with the gun, saw the nanny freeze, saw the girl turn in confusion, ice cream slipping from her hand. There was no time to think, no space for fear. Micah moved because his body knew what his mind could not process yet. He shoved Arlo backward with one arm and lunged forward with the other, wrapping himself around the girl just as the second shot rang out. Pain exploded through his side, white-hot and blinding, stealing his breath and his balance. He felt himself hit the ground, felt the roughness of pavement against his cheek, felt the small, shaking body beneath him. He pressed himself closer, shielding her, even as the noise faded into chaos and sirens began to wail somewhere far away. Micah did not know how long he lay there. Time stretched and warped, each second heavy as an hour. He heard Arlo crying his name, heard voices shouting, heard someone say the shooter was down, tackled by a passerby, before he could fire again. Micah wanted to answer his son, wanted to tell him everything was okay, but his mouth would not cooperate. All he could manage was a whisper, breathless and urgent, meant for the trembling child beneath him. "You're safe, kid. Stay still. You're safe." The girl clung to his jacket, her tears soaking into the fabric. She nodded, though her eyes were wide with shock. Micah felt warm blood pooling beneath him, felt dizziness creeping in. He focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on the idea of Arlo's face. He could not let go yet. Not now. Paramedics arrived in a blur of blue and red lights, voices cutting through the haze. They rolled Micah onto a stretcher, pressed gauze against his wound, asked questions he barely heard. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, he caught sight of Arlo being held by a police officer, his small hands clenched into fists, his face streaked with tears and confusion. Micah tried to smile. He tried to lift a hand. Darkness closed in anyway. The news cycle moved fast, but this story did not disappear quietly. Headlines spread across screens by evening. Single father shielded child in daylight shooting. Stranger takes bullet for CEO's daughter. The city buzzed with the shock of it, with questions and speculation and outrage. The shooter's motives were dissected, the security failure scrutinized, the location debated endlessly. But beneath all of it was one simple truth that cut through the noise. A man with nothing to gain had chosen to put himself between a bullet and a child. The child was Isla Virex, daughter of corporate executive Grant Virex, a man whose name carried weight in financial circles and whose decisions affected thousands of employees worldwide. Grant was used to crises, to negotiations, to numbers and strategy. He was not used to helplessness. When he arrived at the hospital, escorted by security and pale with fear, he was confronted with it fully for the first time. Isla was physically unharmed, shaken but alive, clutching the same yellow dress now smeared with dirt and blood that was not hers. She asked repeatedly about the man who had saved her, her voice small and insistent. Grant stood beside her bed, his tailored suit rumpled, his phone buzzing unanswered in his pocket. He watched doctors move in and out of another room down the hall, watched the door where Micah Rowan lay unconscious, and felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Micah survived surgery, though the doctors were careful with their optimism. The bullet had missed vital organs by inches, lodged dangerously close to his lung. Recovery would be long. Complications were possible. Medical bills would be staggering. When Micah finally woke up, hours later, the first thing he asked for was his son. Arlo climbed onto the hospital bed carefully, his small body tense, his eyes searching Micah's face for reassurance. Micah held him as best he could, whispering apologies, promises, love. He did not feel like a hero. He felt tired, sore, and overwhelmingly grateful to be alive. Grant Virex waited 2 days before asking to visit. He stood awkwardly at the door of Micah's room, stripped of his usual authority by the hum of machines and the smell of antiseptic. When Micah looked at him, their eyes met without pretense. One man had everything society measured as success. The other had a hospital gown, a healing wound, and a son asleep in a chair beside him. Grant thanked him, not with rehearsed words or public statements, but with a quiet sincerity that surprised even himself. He spoke about Isla, about how she could not sleep without asking if the man who saved her was okay. He spoke about fear, about imagining a world without his daughter. Micah listened, nodding slowly, his own chest tight as he imagined Arlo in her place. They understood each other in that moment in a way no shared background ever could. After the cameras moved on and public interest began to wane, Micah returned to his small apartment, unable to work for months, his savings evaporating under the weight of rent and bills. Friends helped when they could. Neighbors dropped off meals. But pride made Micah hesitate to accept too much. He was used to scraping by quietly. He did not expect anything more. Grant did not disappear. He arranged for Micah's medical expenses to be covered anonymously at first, not wanting gratitude or headlines. He ensured Micah's job was protected, his position waiting when he was strong enough to return. He offered resources, therapy, support, without strings attached. Micah resisted at first, uncomfortable with the imbalance, but Arlo's needs softened his reluctance. Pride was easier to swallow than regret. Months passed. Seasons changed. Micah healed, slowly, painfully, learning to move without wincing, learning to breathe without fear. Arlo changed too, quieter in some ways, more observant, his childhood innocence altered by the memory of sirens and blood. Isla began sending drawings to Micah through the hospital, then through Grant's office. Crayon pictures of sunshine, stick figures holding hands, hearts scribbled in bright colors. Micah kept every one. The two families began to intersect in small, intentional ways. Playdates at parks under watchful eyes. Shared meals that were initially awkward, then easier. Conversations that drifted from polite gratitude to genuine connection. Grant saw Micah's patience with his son, his quiet humor, his steady presence. Micah saw Grant struggle to be present, to balance responsibility and fatherhood, to soften edges sharpened by years of boardrooms and deadlines. What began as obligation transformed into something deeper. Grant funded a community safety initiative in the neighborhood where the shooting occurred, not as a press move, but because Micah talked about kids needing safe places to walk and play. Micah returned to work part-time, then full-time, his body reminding him daily of the cost of one instinctive decision. He never regretted it. The anniversary of the shooting arrived quietly, marked not by headlines, but by a simple gathering at the park. Sunlight filtered through trees, children laughed, and life continued in its stubborn, beautiful way. Arlo and Isla chased each other across the grass, their laughter mingling, unaware of the weight their presence carried for the adults watching them. Micah stood with Grant near the fountain, both men silent, absorbing the moment. There were no speeches, no cameras. Just gratitude, humility, and an understanding that some bonds were forged in fire and lasted beyond reason. Just before the end of this story, we want to ask something special. Please take a moment to comment below with a single word that represents what this story made you feel. Your words matter, and they help build a community rooted in empathy and hope. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, Micah felt a quiet peace settle over him. His life was still imperfect, still demanding, still marked by loss. But it was also fuller than he could have imagined. Two families, once strangers, now intertwined by a single moment of courage under a daytime sky. One choice that rippled outward, changing futures, reshaping hearts. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that ordinary people can be heroes and that kindness can rewrite destinies, please like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and reaching those who need them most.